Welcome on into the Wolverine TV. Clayton Safey here with Chris Ballas and Austin Fox, presented by Lewis Jewelers and Manscaped. Remember to head over to thewolverine.com for full coverage of Michigan football, basketball, and recruiting. Use the promo code BLUE60 for 2 months of our premium content for free. Fellas, we got quite a bit to talk about this week on the basketball front. A couple bits of news that we discussed last week have now become official. Franz Wagner headed off to the NBA as expected. Was a sliver of hope there, I feel like, for a second. And then Devontae Jones, Coastal Carolina transfer, coming in as he commits to Michigan, was trending that way last week as well. We did the preview video. But I guess whichever one you guys want to start with. I mean, the timeline was Devontae Jones committing, and then they were, filled up on scholarships there. The writing was already on the wall, but even more on the wall there. And then Franz Wagner decides on Tuesday with a nice letter, I thought, in the Players Tribune, which, kind of said his goodbye to the Michigan community, even though the Wagners will always kind of be Michigan guys, I feel like, for life.
Yeah, they need to start breeding so that we can get a few more Wagners here, man. Those guys, somebody was asking the other day on the message boards, has there ever been a better tandem of brothers at Michigan? And, you go back to the Wistert brothers, John Borton used to cover them back in 1941 through 47, probably. Sorry, John, I'm joking, obviously. But their numbers were retired because those guys were outstanding linemen. So I can't think of anybody since then. If you go back and look at, how many brothers have there actually been? The Spytek brothers, you guys probably haven't even heard of those guys. They were from Wisconsin and they didn't play a whole lot, I think, in the 90s. So, what they've accomplished and what Franz Wagner accomplished, and it's unfortunate, man. I wrote this, that he had to go out on the note that he did because he cared so much and gave his heart and soul to this program, and not just a great player, but a great person and a great student. 4.0 student. I talked to Phil Martelli, Michigan's assistant coach, last week, and he said, this kid's unbelievable, man. And he had told them that he hadn't decided yet. And I really believe there was part of him that said, man, I can't leave like this. But at the same time, everybody, even Juwan Howard, said, man, you can't pass up that kind of money. And your first round guy, you're going to be a lottery pick. You got to go. And I think that's what kids appreciate about Juwan Howard, is that he's honest with them, whereas other coaches might say, hey, we need you back for the program and this and that, without getting specific about who
Yeah,
that would be.
was that any specific impression there at all?
Making 4-year guys out of 2-year guys, but and talking to recruits, it's the same thing. Devontae Jones, listening to him, Frankie Collins, I talked to him the other day, man, and he said his honesty. It wasn't even about basketball. They said they don't talk about basketball. He's honest with them, and that's what these kids love about him. He was honest with Franz Wagner. It's very clear that Wagner's going to be a top 20 pick, maybe even higher than that. You guys have had some projections out that have him top 10. So you wish him well. You're going to miss him, but the program's going to go on, guys, and the culture's strong. You're going to see more players like Franz Wagner, and hopefully we'll see more Wagners. Hopefully I'm around to see it, alive to see more Wagners play here down the road. You guys will be.
You can't blame him one bit for leaving, obviously. Some of the mock drafts that came out yesterday actually had him as the number 11 overall pick in this July's draft. The Athletic had him going number 11 overall. Another big one had him going number 13. So it's pretty obvious that he's likely going to be a top 20 pick. I think that the thought process did enter his mind a little bit of potentially coming back next year and being one of the national title favorites in the country if he were to do so. You look at the potential lineup that they would have had with Wagner and Dickinson and Brooks and Caleb Houston, and that would have been looked at as one of the best teams in the entire country. But again, he really left a heck of a legacy here. He made a big leap from his freshman to sophomore year, turned into an elite defensive player this past year. So I'm anxious to watch the kind of NBA career that he's going to have. I think that he's going to stick in the NBA for quite a while. He's the kind of guy who's going to keep a lot of ties to this Michigan program, and I think remain close to it. We saw a tweet the other day of John Beilein talking to his brother Mo on the phone before one of Mo's NBA games. So Franz Wagner, I think, is going to go down as one of Michigan fans' favorite players here over the last 10 to 20 years or so. And again, I think people are really excited to watch what he does in the pros. And he's just a Michigan man through and through, and exemplifies everything that Juwan Howard is trying to build here in Ann Arbor.
I did love how he took one little dig at his brother in that Players Tribune article. He said, "Hey, if Mo can do it, who anybody can." So, and Mo's kind of toiled around a little bit in the league. I don't think he's had this kind of career that a lot of people thought he would. And he's got to play some defense too, and he's got to be more consistent. But he's been there. He's made a ton of money. He's going to make more money. You can't begrudge these kids. I mean, it's too big a risk, frankly. Football side of things, basketball side of things, to sit there and give another year when you don't have to, when you're already there. I mean, how much is he going to improve his stock? Maybe it goes top 5 or top 7 next year. The money's not going to be that much different. You wish him well and all the best.
Yeah, and I thought Mo went at the right time for him, in terms of making money as well. I mean, his stock wasn't going to get much higher, in my opinion, after that national championship game run. Franz, in a way, I feel like would have just been in the same range next year or worse, in terms of he could have got hurt. He could have not had as good of a season and things like that. So I think it was the right time for him to go. And like you said, Austin, it could be top 10. It could be top 15. That's a lot of money there. And also, I think he's going to continue to develop in the pros. This is a guy who's not going to, development doesn't necessarily stop, especially for these younger guys that are going pro now. When you look at a lot of the one and done types, I mean, Franz is the age of a lot of those guys at 19 years old. So he's going to continue to get better. Chris, is there a better, I know there are better 2-year players in Michigan history, but where does he rank for you, I guess, among those guys? I mean, Nick Stauskas comes to mind for me as a 2-year guy. Trey Burke is the top that I've ever seen as a 2-year guy. But there's not that many. I mean, you get some that are 3, like Mo, Tim Hardaway Jr., and then you get, a couple that were 1. 2-year guys, I guess, where do you, and Jalen Rose was 3, right? So where does he rank
Chris
for
Webber
you?
was 2. And
Chris Webber is 2, so he's him and Trey Burke, and we're up there.
Yeah, I mean, and Nick Stauskas, and I guess Darius Morris was a 2-year guy, and we would have, they could have used him for a 3rd year, but it worked out well. Trey Burke leads them to their first Big Ten title since 1986 in his first year. So things work out. And if you have a strong program where you're not just recruiting the one and dones, but you're recruiting guys like the Will Cheddars that are coming in this year and Isaiah Barnes, and you fill in with some guys who might be that talented, Caleb Houston, we'll see, that remains to be seen. Some of these other guys, then you're going to be fine. You can plug in, especially now with the transfer portal, right? And how well they've done identifying talent. If you look at Mike Smith and Sean D. Brown, it doesn't get any better than that. And then watching that video with Devontae Smith the other day, where he was talking for an hour about culture and about who he is. He wants to get more assists than points. He says, I don't care if I take a step back. He says, I want to win. They've got a way of identifying these guys and doing their homework and talking to these guys about the culture. And if they don't fit, then guess what? They're not going to play. And they're not, and sometimes you get lucky. You look at a Josh Christopher, for example, that could have been a team killer, flat out. No disrespect to the kid, but flat out, I don't think that team ball was his number one goal. He ended up at Arizona State. Michigan was right there, and he strung Michigan along. I think everybody knows that story by now. But the culture they have, as long as you continue to recruit, not just the one and dones, don't be the Kentucky model, then you're going to be fine. And Juwan Howard is proving that he's been able to do that and do it very well.
Yeah, I loved what Devontae Jones said in that interview the other day. It exemplified the team concept, talking about doing whatever it takes to win doing whatever it takes for the team to win at a high level, potentially going to Final Fours, national titles. It did remind me of what Sean D. Brown and Mike Smith were saying when they transferred here prior to last season. I remember I actually called up Sean D. Brown like a week after he committed to Michigan last year, and that was the first thing he talked about, is how he wants to do whatever it'll take for the team to win at a high level. He wanted to win a Big Ten regular season title, and he wanted to win a national title. And sure enough, he did win a Big Ten championship, sacrificing that starting role to come off the bench. So Juwan Howard knows exactly what he's looking for in that transfer portal. Again, I think Devontae Jones has the right attitude and the right mindset, and he exemplifies that. I don't think Juwan Howard would have gone after him or accepted his commitment if he didn't realize that that's what it's going to take to win here. So I'm excited to see what he'll bring, and I think he'll fit right into this Michigan culture and what Juwan Howard has built here over the last 2 years.
We got the question on our Thursday chat yesterday on our message board over at the Wolverine.com of, what does Devontae Jones's addition do to the team's floor and the team's ceiling? And I said I think the ceiling stays the same because my ceiling for this team, if all the cards, go their way, is basically a national title or at least getting to that final game. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying this team has the potential. And I thought it probably did, if Caleb Houston panned out as like, okay, this is a legit, a guy who could, be an all Big Ten guy as a freshman and, possibly that one and done that people think he could be. Hunter Dickinson continues his progression, gets even better, and things like that, on and on and on. I thought the ceiling stays the same. Now I would put the odds on them getting and achieving all those things a little bit higher, but I think the floor is raised significantly because let's say Frankie Collins comes in and we expect him to be good and even, a contributor right away, but let's say he comes in and the learning curve's a little steep, and then you have Zeb Jackson playing a lot of minutes and he necessarily didn't make a huge jump. We're talking hypotheticals here, but, then the floor I think would have been significantly lower for this team, but Devontae Jones, I'm not saying he's going to be Mike Smith. I think he can have a similar impact, but I think that the floor for this team is raised to, fourth, maybe in the Big Ten at the worst in terms of getting a double bye there. I know you got to stay healthy, and that's kind of factors in too, but what are your guys' thoughts on that question? I thought it was a good one.
Yeah, we'll see, and you never know. I mean, this was a top 25 team, borderline top 25 team last year at the beginning of the year, and some teams exceeded expectations. I think Purdue was probably one of them. You never know when you've got freshmen that come in. Who is Illinois' freshman point guard? His name escapes me.
Curbelo.
Yeah, Curbelo. Yeah, look what he did and the impact that he had on that program. I think Frankie Collins is going to be one hell of a basketball player from the get-go. This kid gets downhill. He's got the ball on a string. His crossover, his attitude. Again, talking to him the other night, man, what a great kid. Usually, and I wrote this on the message board, you interview a kid, you text him, thank you. And because these kids are getting hit up by, random YouTube guys that, anybody with a camera can be a reporter now. And so they're getting hundreds sometimes of calls a week from, we used to be the only ones doing this. And so for them to take the time, you give them a thank you and you say, hey man, it means a lot, because it does. And before I could even thank him, he sends me a text back and he says, thanks, man. I hope you guys are safe. Really appreciate you. And I'm thinking, man, that is class and you can't fake it. And what Phil Martelli told me, man, is that these guys, he said all of them, and Sadi said they're just great kids. Sadi Washington, he said it's unbelievable that the kind of kids that we're recruiting are not just great ball players, but great kids. And John Beilein used to go after that, obviously, as well, and develop that culture here that Juwan Howard has continued. But to me, that's a good sign. And of guys that, hey, even if Frankie Collins doesn't play right away, and he will in some role, that he has said, I'm all in for the team, man. I just want to win. And that's what you hear from all these kids. They obviously have big goals, but that's the most important thing. I think Frankie Collins, honestly, I think he's going to have an impact. I think watch and see. He's working on a shot now. He doesn't take many. When he does, he makes some. It's not like a Xavier Simpson thing. By the way, Xavier Simpson improved to 36% senior year from 22. So yes, it can be done, but I like it. But to get back to your original point, I think Jones is definitely, when you get that veteran leadership, you look at Smith and the calming influence that he had out there, and Shawnee Brown as well, and how much they loved and respected these guys. Jones did talk about Frankie Collins and coexisting and how they're going to be really good together. I love that. I love the mesh of a team like that, where it's not all or nothing. You've got veterans, you got young guys that can play. It's going to be really good.
I actually had a similar interaction the other day. I called up Musa Diabate's head coach at IMG Academy, Sean McAloon, and of course he raved about Diabate as a player, as coaches always do about their players. But again, what he talked about more was his personality and his mindset and his work ethic. He said this kid is as humble as they come. And what I loved most of all about the conversation was that McAloon said Diabate loves to stay out of the spotlight and off social media, and he's not interested in being the center of attention or doing all these interviews. And that's so seldom seen nowadays among elite big shot recruits like Diabate is. He's a top 30 player in the country. So again, we've said it countless times on here, but that's going to fit in perfectly to what Juwan Howard is building here. As for Michigan's potential ceiling and floor next year, Clay, you mentioned potentially fourth in the Big Ten at worst. I would go a little lower just because the Big Ten is still a grind and it's really hard to finish that high, but I don't think there's any question. This is definitely a tournament team, worst case scenario. As for their ceiling, it's hard not to say that Final Four national title contention once again, because they're going to have a nice blend of veterans and youth. And obviously, Juwan Howard knows what he's doing here. So, floor, I would say 6th or 7th in the Big Ten and a bubble team at worst. But ceiling, again, I think it's right in that Final Four national title contention range.
Yeah,
I heard Austin. Yeah, I heard Austin say bubble team. Austin Fox just predicted this is a bubble team. All right, go ahead, Clay.
We'll keep that on. Yeah, let me write that down.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but similar interaction I had with Kobe Buffkin too. So I mean, it's just on and on and on when you guys talk about some of the conversations you're having. It took him a few days to get back to me, but turns out he was out training in LA and he was super busy and the time difference and everything else. But then once I got him, he's like, "Oh shoot, I forgot to get back to you." And we talked for a while, and one of the things I asked him is like, in the recruiting process, this staff, they don't, do they make any promises to you on what's going to happen, or do they promise more of an opportunity? And he said the latter. They promise that you can come in and compete. And I said, what does the mantra for competitors only mean to you? And he said it means everything, because they're all, they know they're the number one class in the country, but it doesn't mean anything to them. They just want to come in and work and try to make an impact themselves. And they understand it's kind of on themselves to get up to snuff and be the kind of player that they want to be right away. And they know that the coaches will put them in if they're ready. So that type of mentality, they just want to work. June 25th is the date. Seems like that they're going to be moving in, and I think they're all excited. And then, Chris, the last thing for me on basketball was the quote from Sadie Washington from your column yesterday, which was incredible. The culture we've been able to fortify here at Michigan, the team success is the individual success. And then I'll parlay that with a John Borton column from yesterday as well, saying, and Brian Bush, the play-by-play man for Michigan, of course, was his subject there with the interview. And he said, man, the culture can be strong, and we knew Juwan, was building that culture. But if the wins don't come, you can't necessarily continue to sell it as strongly. But the wins came, and that might have been the perfect season last year for Juwan Howard to build on, because the culture is strong. We kind of knew that, and everyone talked about it his first year, but they went 19-12, I think, right? So, and there was no NCAA tournament, but now you have the success. You win the Big Ten, you make the Elite Eight. You can tell kids and show kids, hey, this works. And it'll probably work going forward if you follow this mold. And I think that's huge to be able to build off of.
And that quote was specifically about the transfer portal, because I asked him, are you going to scare kids off? I didn't ask it that way, but you have to wonder. You look at a Frankie Collins and you look at the freshmen, and you've got that for competitors only mantra. But when you're going to the transfer portal, a lot of fans are like, well, wait a minute, what about the freshmen? Aren't they going to be upset? Not if they want to win. And if, yeah, they want to play. But you saw what happened with Mike Smith and how well that worked out. And guess what? Zeb Jackson was part of a championship team, and he was having a ball. He might have played more had Mike Smith not been here, would have played more, and maybe would have, gotten a lot more minutes. I think that's probably the case. But the first and foremost, they're getting kids that want to win. And I loved the approach with Jones. From what we heard, he asked Juwan, he goes, what happens if I go into a slump? Are you going to bench me? And Juwan's like, I can't tell you that, man. I don't know. He said, all I can tell you is that we're going to do what's best for the team and what's best for the player, and continue, to help you work through it if you do go in through a slump. And that's the kind of things, kids know when they're being BS'd. They hear so many coaches. I can't even tell you some of the stories we've heard about coaches and promises they've made. Parents, talking to parents of these kids, it's like, okay, you can tell who's real and who's not. And kids can too. They're not stupid. And they all say the same thing about Juwan Howard. And the guys, more importantly, the guys departing say the same thing. When we talked to Sean E. Brown, and he said, everything he told me and everything that the guys told me about coming here about Juwan Howard was true. And he said, I lived it. He said, you couldn't ask for a better mentor. He was exactly the same guy he was. Now, he was hard on him at times. And he said, but that's exactly what you need, when you need a kick in the butt. But man, again, what they've got in Juwan Howard, nobody, I think, could have predicted how good he would have been. And it would have been a leap of faith because, a lot of NBA guys that haven't had the experience don't work out, but he cares so much. And that's what you have to understand, the passion. When he said, I can't fail, to me, that was an indication that he really got it. And you can see how he's evolved already, man. And, still growing. This guy, pretty special.
Juwan Howard obviously deserves all the credit in the world for this culture he's built, but at the same time, I think his assistant coaches deserve a ton of the credit as well. Sadie Washington, Phil Martelli, and Howard Isley. Clayton, you said that was a quote from Sadie Washington. He was obviously part of an outstanding culture beforehand as well under John Beilein. He was the lone holdover from that staff. Phil Martelli obviously knows a thing or two about culture as well, having coached at St. Joe's for 25 or 30 years or whatever it was since the early 1980s. Then Howard Isley as well, never having coached in college. So those three understand it as well. I don't think they would be here if they didn't. So Juwan Howard put together an outstanding staff. I think they were a huge part of Michigan's success last year as well. I'm really glad that it looks like all three are sticking around in Ann Arbor. Howard Isley had interviewed with some other jobs this offseason, Boston College, Eastern Michigan, but both of those schools filled their positions already. So I think keeping this staff intact is crucial as well. And it makes for an exciting future because it's hard not to envision Howard and these assistant coaches keeping this thing rolling for the foreseeable future here.
And I do want to add one thing. And speaking to national guys, are like, the jury's still somewhat out because he inherited the keys to a Cadillac. And this is almost to a man, in acknowledging how good he's been. And they say there's no, you know what? It's not a sin to talk about the culture that John Beilein built here and what Juwan Howard inherited. And he was the first one to acknowledge that. That is not taking away anything from what Juwan Howard has accomplished. But that thing was rolling under John Beilein and what he accomplished here. That's why Michigan's kind of become a basketball school. You hate to say it, but I'll tell you what, you look at our stories and you look at the interest that Juwan Howard and John Beilein have generated compared to Michigan football. We've just after spring ball, we've spent 20 minutes talking about Michigan basketball, and there are going to be a ton of people who watch this thing because they love Michigan basketball now and what Juwan Howard has built. This is the culture that Michigan football had for so many years under Bo Schembechler, Lloyd Carr, Gary Moeller, that that you don't see right now, frankly, and that they need to get back. This is the model. It's right there, guys. Go and emulate it and get it back, because this could be an unbelievable two-sport school. Michigan football, obviously more than that with all the other great sports here. But you know what? When you think about great two-sport schools, Michigan has been, and it should be. And hopefully football will get back there as well.
They're also a women's basketball school, too. They got that
Right.
thing rolling as well.
Field hockey, you can go right down the list. Softball, baseball.
Women's
It's been
gymnastics. Yep.
Women's gymnastics, obviously. That was fun. I was
Yeah.
nervous. I was nervous for those women watching those. I honestly, you know what? There's so much at stake. You want to talk about pressure and culture. They've won 24 Big Ten championships in women's gymnastics. I know people, that's not as popular a sport, but you go ahead and watch those ladies on that beam at the end with all that pressure on their shoulders. That is clutch performance.
Yeah, it definitely was. And Juwan Howard, just back to that real quick, his story will always be tied in with John Beilein's because he took over for a legend. And I think Juwan Howard would be the first to tell you, like, he loves Michigan in part because, obviously he went there and had great experiences there, but this is a great program historically, and you'd much rather have that than the alternative and take over for somebody who didn't have this thing rolling when he came in. So he's definitely glad that a lot of these guys that he's coaching now were John Beilein guys were here as opposed to, trying to rebuild or whatever. So I think he'd be the first to tell you that as well, and you got to give him credit too, and everybody I think is doing that too. I mean, he is getting a lot of recognition, as you said. It seems like, our site is, people can't hear enough about it. So it's been super fun to cover. Let's talk about the NFL draft real quick. Before we do, though, support for this show is brought to you by Manscaped, which is the best in below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. Manscaped is trusted by over 2 million men worldwide, including us. we have an exclusive offer for our viewers, 20% off plus free shipping with the code 20GOBLUE at manscaped.com. That's 20GOBLUE at manscaped.com. We got the package they sent us. We showed that on the show, last week or the week before. The Lawnmower 3.0 Perfect Package was the one that we received. Fellas, how you enjoying it?
Loving it, man. How about the boxers? Have you tried the boxers on yet?
Comfortable, yeah.
As hell, man. It's amazing. So, and it's not something you think about until you need it. So, and it's been fantastic, man. I can't believe it, and I'm proud to wear the shirt, man. It's fun. I'm not even sure we're allowed to say the slogan on the air, but it's great, and it's great to have him on board, man. It's been a great talking point, and I think we've gotten a few people to sign up for it as well.
I was blown away with how big the package was. There was a lot more in there than I expected. Like you said, there's the razor, the deodorant, the shirt, the boxers. It's really the total package. So everyone knows I take my personal hygiene very seriously, and this will help you enhance that and take your personal hygiene to a whole new level. So you should absolutely give it a try immediately.
Total package.
Only Austin Fox would go with the big package line. So, all right, let's do it. Let's switch gears here.
Yeah. All right, let's talk NFL draft. Michigan with 8 guys picked, 39 since Jim Harbaugh's been here. Kwity Paye, that was awesome. First of all, I just wanted to mention that his interview after getting picked and saying he's standing next to his mom and she's retired now, she's done working. Stole the draft. That was the moment of the draft on Thursday night. There's the tear there for Chris, and but Kwity Paye going first. 8 guys, even the long snapper picked. One of my takeaways was a lot of those guys didn't play a whole lot of football in 2020. Injuries, opt-outs to just about all of them. Chris Evans, maybe the only guy, and Ben Mason who didn't get hurt, but Ben Mason's a fullback, not an every down guy, and then Chris Evans was a rotational running back. First running back selected since Mike Hart in 2008. What were your guys' thoughts on another successful draft for Michigan football?
Well, that's pathetic, number one. I mean, come on, man. And Mike Hart, was not a great pro. He was a great college back, outstanding college back. But you need to be better than that at Michigan. And my thought is that it's great that Cam Cheeseman went your long snapper, but I'd much rather have a wide receiver in the top rounds of the draft or a running back in the top rounds of the draft, because that's what's separating Michigan from some of these other schools. And you can have your occasional, every school has the occasional elite offensive lineman or defensive tackle or linebacker or whatever. And Michigan's had a lot of draft picks, but a lot of them are down the list of, not difference makers in the pros. And you need some of those flat out. 25, I think, players from the 1997 team that won the national championship started a game that year. And a lot of them were impact guys. And we've talked about that. Tom Brady was on the bench. And he wasn't one of them. So what does that tell you, man? You need the talent. And it's getting harder and harder because, for various reasons, those top 4 or 5 programs are hoarding all of the elite talent. Some try to get in there, the Georgias, the Johnny-come-latelys, the Tennessees, and then they get busted, and then they go right back down where they should be. So, but they need more like that, and they need to do a better job identifying talent like Harbaugh did at Stanford, in my opinion, with some of these under-the-radar guys that become great picks. And Kwity Paye is a prime example. I think that's a great example. So maybe a little more film watching, expand your recruiting room, but rely on your instincts, coach, and because you've done this before and you've done it for a long time, watching film. We've got lists of guys that he liked that became pros, impact pros that were maybe 3-star guys. Need to get back there because you're not going to be, you're not on that level where you're going to be competing for the elite players in the country. You've got to find some and turn these guys into elite playmakers as well.
We talked on here, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, about Michigan's lack of skill position players going highly in NFL drafts, and that was exemplified once again this year. I know, Clay, you said Chris Evans came off the board in the 6th round, the first Michigan running back taken since Mike Hart. Nico Collins going in the 3rd round of the Texans was the highest a Michigan wide receiver had gone in the NFL draft since Devin Funchess back in 2015. Obviously, a Brady Hoke product. So in a lot of ways, that trend continued this year. On a positive note, Michigan has now had a 1st-round pick in 3 straight NFL drafts. that actually may not seem like much of an accomplishment, but that's something they've only done 4 other times in school history. So it's actually a lot harder to do than people realize. I know some people like to put a lot of stock into NFL draft picks and kind of gauge your talent on the field in that regard, but I think it can be skewed a lot, and we talked about that 2 weeks ago. And the perfect example of that is over the last 5 or 6 years, dating back to the 2016 draft when Harbaugh took over, Michigan actually has more NFL picks than Clemson. Now, obviously, Michigan has not had more talent than Clemson during that span, so that's what I meant when I said it's skewed a little bit. There are a lot of positives surrounding these drafts. Obviously, a lot of these guys are going in the later rounds. Michigan is not having a lot of these first and second rounders. I know they had 3 third-rounders. Jalen Mayfield went in the third round. Like I said, Collins went in the third round. Ambry Thomas snuck there into the third round. Michigan has now had a player drafted in 83 straight drafts, a streak that only USC can match. Michigan State was close behind. They had someone picked in 80 straight drafts, but that streak came to an end this year. So Michigan has, I believe, now the 5th most NFL draft picks in college football history. But like Chris said, they need more of those skill position guys going higher in the high rounds, and more quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers going in the first and second rounds. And until they get to that point, it's hard to envision them truly contending for college football playoff appearances.
You nailed it. Quarterback, man. Where's the guy? You got to have that guy that can win some games. Joe Burrow, the guys that they've had at Ohio State. That's where it starts, too. And they've been lacking in that area. It needs to be better. And, man, you're hoping this is the year. I think it'll be another year or two, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the Clemson comparison to me is fascinating, Austin, that you brought up. It is quarterback. I was going to mention that with Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson. I mean, let's say Michigan had those 2 guys just to play, a hypothetical. They probably win a couple Big Tens. They're probably in a couple college football playoffs. I'd almost guarantee it in a way with how good those guys are, and the fact that you mentioned Michigan has these other NFL type guys around them. Now I know a lot of those are late round, the Jordan Glasgows, the Cam Cheeseman counts, and it doesn't really matter, I guess, who you have at long snapper or whatever, but still, I mean, the numbers are there. The talent has been there. Michigan's been close. Now, that's a totally different thing than what we're dealing with here, coming off 2-4, heading into a season with a ton of question marks. But if you look at the big picture under Harbaugh, it would be a quarterback. It would be, that Clemson had Travis Etienne and, running backs, and they've got receivers. And you look at the Alabamas of the world with, their 2018, I think, recruiting class that had Mac Jones, was Tua, I think, the year before, but then you had all those receivers that have gone the last 2 years, including a Heisman winner. So it's the skill position guys, really, I think, that Michigan's lacking. And, I guess that's kind of the story at this point. And now this rebuild, I think that they're kind of entering is a totally different thing because they're quite depleted at some different positions. But we could go on that for quite a while. Any last thoughts on the draft?
Next time. Nope. You know what? Good for the kids. We wish them well. All of them. I don't know who's going to be an impact player. I hope Kwity Paye is, and that he lasts for a long time, gets that huge second contract, and all of them the same thing. So I think Nico Collins is going to do some things. I think he was under-targeted at times. Not a great route runner, but I think he'll be good in the pros. And, we'll talk more football next time, guys, about some spring stuff and some things we've seen. So, but once again, basketball, top dog.
Yeah. And we'll talk more football as we get closer and closer, of course, obviously, as you said. But, yeah, Nico Collins, watch out for him. Could be the Chase Claypool possibly for the Houston Texans. They got a lot of problems, though. But we will talk about not that next time. We'll talk more football next time as well. We'll see everyone next time. Check out that Manscaped offer that we talked about. Use the code 20GOBLUE to get your Manscaped goods.